You're listening to audio from Kingdom Church. If you would like to check out more information or give to our ministry, please visit us at kingdomchurch.life.
Tonight's the last night. We're wrapping up 21 days of prayer and fasting. By next Wednesday, it'll be done. So this is the last week. This is the last time we're teaching on fasting. And if you've missed any of it, I just want to kind of give you a quick recap. So week 1, we talked about what fasting actually is. Because there were many of us in the room that actually didn't know what fasting was, and that's okay. It just that just means that you haven't been taught. I know I said that night, like, this is the first time in any youth group in the last 10 years that I've been a pastor at, that it is the first time I've actually taught students about fasting. And so don't feel bad, because for me, this is my first time teaching it. So last week, we talked about what fasting does inside of us. That fasting exposes what actually has been forming us. It aligns our heart with God's heart. And then tonight, we're talking about what fasting does through you. Because here's the thing, when you finally make space and you start to let God shape you, then he starts preparing us for things that we couldn't handle before. And so let me ask you this question. Have you ever tried to do something like difficult without preparing at all? Have you ever tried to do something without preparing? Yeah. How many of y'all you knew you had a math test and you didn't study? Like you just yeah, no, I appreciate your honesty. You're just like, no, like I don't know why, but I think sometimes we think we're like, hey, I really believe in me. So I don't need to study. I'm just going to pass, right? And then what happens? We sit down at the table. We got the test in front of us. And then what happens? You ever have that oh crap moment? You're just like, dang it, why didn't I study? Have you ever had that? Well, what about anybody ever played a sport and you're coming to it's game day and you just didn't pay attention at practice at all? And you just kind of, yeah, exactly. And here's something, I literally did this on accident the other day. So I fell asleep without plugging my phone in. And so I woke up and then I had a really busy day. And I expected that I was going to go the rest of the day on 30% battery. That just doesn't work. I'm over here dimming my screen, putting it in low power mode. I'm anything that I can do to make sure that the battery lasts as long as possible. And here's the thing. In moments like that, we don't suddenly stop caring. Sometimes we care even more. But you realize that it's too late. And that wanting something isn't the same as being ready or being prepared for that thing. And so let me ask you this, why do you think we expect big outcomes without big preparation? Why do you think we do that? Because we don't want to study, yeah? You overestimate your abilities, yeah? Anything else? Well, why do we expect big outcomes without big preparation? No, what do you think? Ethan, help him out. Why do we expect big outcomes without big preparation? Bro, sometimes we just lazy, right? We're just lazy. We're dude, I don't want to do that. Here's the thing. I think a lot of us feel that same tension in our relationship with God. We want peace. Anybody want peace in their life? Anybody ever tried slowing down to get it? Some of y'all lying, bro. We want peace, but we don't want to slow down. We want freedom, but we don't like to change our habits. We want God to move, but we don't want to make space for him to move. Here's one thing. I was talking to a student in the first week of this, and we were talking about like making time for God, like spending time in the Word, making sure you're reading your Bible, praying that you're spending time with God. And they were like, man, Pastor Andrew, I just don't have any time. And so we expect something out of a relationship with God that we won't even make time for, that we won't clear some space for. Like we want all of these things, but we don't want the preparation. And when we step into moments when you have needed the preparation, you realize that you're actually running on empty. And so tonight we're going to look at two moments in Scripture where God moves powerfully, but only after people finally slow down, they prepare their hearts before they then step into those big moments. Because listen, sometimes in life, things don't move forward until we're ready to move forward with God. And so the first moment we're going to be going to look at is found in the book of Esther. Before we get there, I just want to give you a little bit of background information. I want you to understand what's happening in the moment. So at this point in the Bible, God's people, they're living in exile. That means they don't have land of their own. They don't have their own king. They're living under this foreign empire, and they're literally scattered and vulnerable. And then there's this young Jewish girl named Esther, and she ends up becoming queen because God placed her there. She's young, she's far from home, and she's trying to survive a system that she doesn't control. And up until now, like literally nobody knows that she's Jewish. And then there's this guy named Haman, and he makes a law that all the Jewish people are going to be wiped out. Like not just kicked out, not just punished.
Could you try again?
Yeah, hello. I'm trying again, okay? They weren't wiped out, or they were not just kicked out. He wanted to completely destroy the Jewish people. And Esther finds out that she might be the only person to kind of help in that situation. And so Esther is stuck in this predicament, though, because if she goes to the king, she could be killed. If she doesn't go to the king, then her people could be killed. And so her cousin Mordecai basically tells her, listen, he writes her a letter and he says, you were placed here for a reason. That this might be the moment that God was preparing Esther for, and the reason why she was queen. And so before Esther did anything, before she speaks, before she acts, before she risks her life, look at what she tells her people to do. Let's look at Esther chapter 4, verse 16. It says, go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days. Night or day. And my female servants will all fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went and did everything that Esther had commanded him. And so the first thing that we kind of learn from this, and that we're going to talk about tonight, if you're taking notes, is this. See, surrender comes before courage. Surrender comes before courage. And so Esther is standing in a moment that could literally change everything. And she knew that this moment was bigger than she could even imagine, bigger than she was. And this isn't one of those moments where somebody like gives this pep talk, like this really inspiring speech, and then suddenly everything else feels easy. Like this is a heavy moment. And if we were honest, if we were in a similar position, we would probably just be like, hey, God, can you just make me brave? Like, can you just give me the courage? Like we want the fear to go away. We want the moment to feel like it's manageable before we stepped into it. But that's not what Esther does at all. Before she goes to the king, before she risks her life, she writes a letter to her people and she says, hey, look, fast and pray with me. She doesn't wait until she feels ready. She doesn't wait until she feels strong. Like she literally slows everything down first. Think about this. Do y'all do fire drills in school? Y'all still do fire drills in school? Did you really? That's crazy. So when I was growing up in school, we had fire drills. We had tornado drills because where I came from, like there were tornadoes. I don't know. Do y'all do tornado drills here? I didn't think so. Yeah, so we did all these different drills for all these different situations because they knew that when there's a real emergency, like we don't want to have to try and figure it out in that moment, right? And so you still have these fire drills. And you practice and you prepare ahead of time before the moment comes, because if you don't prepare, when it comes, it's too late. And so Esther knew that this moment was too big to just improvise, to just try to make up as she goes. And so she prepares her heart before she ever steps into it. And she starts by admitting, hey, man, God, I can't do this on my own. And that's really what surrender is. Surrender is when you stop pretending that you've got it handled and you start admitting that you don't. And fasting is one of the ways that we actually practice surrender, because it reminds us that we actually are dependent on God. It exposes what we want to reach for. When we need something to calm us, or to distract us, or to make us feel like we're in control again. And so here's the lie that we believe. We sometimes believe that courage means not being afraid. Have you ever thought of courage like that, just not being afraid? See, real courage almost always shows up when fear is still there. See, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is actually obedience in the middle of that fear. And so surrender is what makes that kind of courage possible. And so here's the reality for some of us in the room. Some of you are walking into moments right now that feel bigger than you. You may be facing the consequences of somebody else's actions. Maybe it's standing up for your faith at school. Or maybe it's choosing obedience when you know it's going to cost you something socially. And maybe you're wanting to feel brave. But Esther's story shows us that bravery doesn't come first. Surrender comes first. And it's surrendering to God. Like, you don't wait for courage to show up in the moment. You let God form courage in you before the moment even ever arrives. And that's why fasting matters, because it's saying, God, I am not enough, but you are. And so surrender comes before courage. And here's what's important to notice, though. See, Esther doesn't stay in the fast forever. She doesn't pray and then avoid the king. At some point, surrender has to move into action. There comes a moment where preparation turns into obedience, because surrender doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how you step into the moment that God's placed in front of you. And so fasting and prayer, it's not meant to be hidden or passive. Like it's literally meant to align us with God so that when the moment comes, we don't freeze. We move. And not in our own strength, not pretending that like we've got it all together, that we're fearless, but it's trusting God and trusting that He's already at work in the midst of the things that we can't see yet. And that brings us to point 2. Fasting prepares you for calling. See, we're going to fast forward to the book of Acts, and what's interesting is that the situations that we're going to look at couldn't be more different, but the posture is still the same. See, in Acts chapter 13, it opens up with the church at Antioch. And this church, it's not in any danger in any way. Like it's not, there's nobody threatening their lives. Like everything's going pretty well. Actually, the church is even growing and it's gaining momentum, which tells us something that fasting isn't always because something's broken. And they were fasting because they wanted to be ready for what God might do next. And so in Acts chapter 13, verse 2, it says this. It says, as they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Did you notice when God speaks? It's not when they're planning. It's not while they're trying to debate strategy or like figure something out. It was literally God speaks when they're worshiping and they're fasting. And so here's the thing a lot of us want. See, we want God to shout out our purpose. Have you ever just been like, God, can you just tell me what you want me to do? Have you ever felt like that before? Yeah. Like me, I understand. But see, the thing is, God often waits until we quiet ourselves enough that we actually hear him speak. And the second thing I want you to notice is that God doesn't just say, he doesn't say, hey, like you should think about doing this someday. He says, hey, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul. That word set apart in the original language, it literally means to make ready. In other words, Barnabas and Saul, they're about to step into something that required some preparation. Kind of like the test that you should have prepared for. And here's the wild thing is Barnabas and Saul, they were already serving faithfully. That they weren't just waiting around for something to do. Like they were already at work, but fasting prepared them for what God had next for them. And we should fast to be ready for when God calls us. Because here's the thing, if God is speaking, but we're always distracted, then the problem isn't that God is silent. It's that we're just not paying attention. We often fill every moment with noise, and I'm guilty of that. I told y'all night one, I'm listening to a podcast or a sermon from another pastor, or I'm listening to some sort of video all the time. Like I'm literally like in the shower listening to podcasts. I'm cooking dinner, listening to podcasts. I'm driving in the car when I'm by myself, listening. And so this is something that God's been working on in me is like, hey, like, how can I speak to you when you don't ever let there be silence? You don't ever allow room for me to speak. See, some of you have been asking God these big questions about your future. You've been asking God about your relationships. Or you've been asking God about your purpose. But oftentimes we're asking God in the middle of constant distraction. Have you ever noticed that we always seem to be multitasking? Can we be honest? Have you ever like been praying while you're scrolling? You're just like, God, help me. Oh, this is cool. God, I've got this test later today. But did you see this video? Y'all thought I had a video. That was crazy. But oftentimes, like we're trying to do these things while we're multitasking, and so then we wonder why it feels like we're so far from God, or that everything feels unclear. But literally, fasting creates the space for God to give us direction. It literally quiets everything around us long enough for God to shape not just your heart, but your next steps. Let's look at verse 3. Acts chapter 13, verse 3, it says this. Then, after they had fasted and prayed and laid hands on them, they sent them off. See, what we need to realize is Paul and Barnabas, they did not fast and pray and then just stay in the room. No, they literally sent them out to do what God was preparing them to do. And that's the part that we can miss. See, fasting didn't end with a feeling, fasting led with a mission. And so here's what I want you to understand about why we started this year with fasting. Because I want you to hear my heart in this. There will be a moment someday, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's 5 years from now. There will be a moment that you are no longer sitting in this room. It happens to everybody. Whether you graduate or you move or you go to college or whatever the case may be, there will be a point in time where you are no longer sitting in this room. And God, at the end of last year, really just kind of checked my spirit. He was speaking to me. He was like, hey, like, dude, what are you preparing them for? And so what I'm going to do is the best that I can is prepare you for wherever God's going to call you next. Man, maybe for some of you it's your school. Or maybe God's going to call you to another youth group. Or maybe God's going to call you to another city. And I want to be able to say, as best as I possibly can, as far as it depended on me, that I tried my best to equip you and point you to Jesus in every area of your life. And so if you weren't here for week one, I told y'all, I literally had friends of mine who are youth pastors in other parts of the country look at me and go, you are crazy for starting off in January with fasting. They're like, you are going to kill whatever momentum you had. And here's the thing, I don't care about momentum. I don't care how many butts are in the seats. That's not what matters to me. What matters to me is that I am continually pointing you to Christ. That you are continually learning and growing. And that as best as I can, I am trying to ignite a passion in your life for Christ. Because listen, there will be a day where you don't have me. I cannot hold your hand for the rest of your life in your walk with God. And so you've got to be able to do it on your own. Not that I don't want to. Man, I would love to. Like, that's my heart's desire. Like, I can't tell you how often, like, I look at Facebook because I'm old, and like, I've got kids from previous ministries, and I see one of two things. Either they have walked away from the Lord and they're not going to church, they're not involved, they're not reading their Bible, they don't really even care anything about God. And that breaks my heart. And then there are people who, man, I get to see them raise their kids in some other church, under some other pastor. And they get to instill in their kids a lot of the things that I got to instill in them when they were your age. And so I hope you hear my heart in this. I can get stuck sometimes in the nuts and bolts of just trying to unpack things. I am at heart, like, I like to teach. This was not on my notes because I want you to hear my heart. I don't want you to forget this moment when some other pastor starts talking about fasting. And you go, dang, man, I had a youth pastor that loved me enough to teach me about fasting. Because I got plenty of other students in other youth ministries that I never taught about fasting and never talked about the importance of it and why we do it. And I made it up in my mind at the end of last year that y'all are going to be different. And so this next year, I've already been praying and developing just kind of the next sermon series literally I have like till June planned. And what I feel like the Lord is wanting us as the Forge to walk through, to grow in. Because listen, I don't ever want to be a youth group. I don't want to be the youth pastor of a youth group who has a bunch of students who are satisfied with just sitting in a seat. Because this is not what it's about. We're going to talk about what it's about here in just a second. Here's the thing. Most of us sitting in this room will not be in full-time ministry. Most of y'all will not do what I do. You won't be on a worship team. Some of you may not ever lead a ministry. But listen, God is calling you right where you are to reach the people that he has given around you to point them to Christ. And so if you ever say, man, Pastor Andrew, I don't know what God's purpose is for my life, your purpose, let me tell you, your purpose is to always point people to Jesus no matter where you're at, no matter what job you have. Doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, doesn't matter if you're a mechanic, doesn't matter if you're a doctor, doesn't matter if you're a veterinarian, it doesn't matter if you're a school teacher, it doesn't matter if you work at Amalgamated Sugar. Your job, your purpose is in whatever area that you work in, it is to point people to Christ. Listen, it'll be on the screen if you're taking notes. God never prepares you for you to just stay where you're at. He prepares you so he can send you. See, the moment God forms you enough to carry the responsibility that he's trying to call you into, he starts aiming your life outwards towards other people, towards people who are in need, towards a purpose that is beyond yourself. And so doing what God is calling you to do isn't always exciting. Man, sometimes it's heavy. You know how many students I've sat across tables with, and they have just unpacked the unimaginable, horrible things that have happened in their life. And they look at me and go, well, so what do I do next? Man, sometimes it's not always fun. It's heavy. Now, we get moments where we get to go to Roaring Springs and we do all these incredible trips and we do camp and we do fall retreat and we shoot each other with airsoft guns at camp. Like, we do these wild things. Miss Hannah and I devised some of the craziest games to play at camp. But it's not always like that. Sometimes what God is calling you to is heavy. And listen, God doesn't place weight on people who haven't been shaped to carry it. If you were here on Sunday and I was talking about Joseph, like, this is literally what I was talking about. Like, God is forming a foundation in us so that when stuff happens, like we don't fall, we don't break, like literally, like we have a firm foundation. And so what God knew is that he was sending Barnabas and Saul into opposition, that there were going to be people who didn't like them just because they were Christians. God knew that he was sending them into places that were going to reject him. See, God knew that he was sending them into places where they were going to experience suffering, where life was going to be hard. And listen, fasting helped form them for the wait for what God was calling them to. If you're taking notes, number 3. Fasting is about mission, not just me. Fasting is about mission, not just me. See, in both of the stories, fasting pushes the people involved outward. God never shapes people so they can just stay comfortable. And so preparation always leads to being sent, and that should reframe why we fast. Listen to me. It's not just about feeling closer to God. Fasting is not just about discipline. Fasting is not just about self-control. If you're taking notes, write this down. Fasting realigns us with God's heart. Remember from last week, that was literally one of our points. Tonight we're continuing it because God's heart is always moving towards people. See, fasting realigns our heart with God's heart. And God's heart is always moving towards people. See, when you fast, you become more aware of the needs of the people around you. You notice the people at school that feel invisible. You know that one kid that sits by himself at lunch? Nobody talks to him. You got like 30 minutes and like they don't ever talk to anybody, or like they're not really interacting with people. Like man, the fasting helps you notice those people. Man, fasting helps you become more sensitive to injustice, to loneliness, to pain. And so you start seeing your everyday spaces as a place to point other people to God and not just places that you walk through. That's why you've heard me talk about when I go to Mo Bettis. Listen, no joke. You can laugh at me if you want to. We go to Mo Bettis every Wednesday. Nobody laughed. Good. Man, thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys. We literally go to Mo Bettis every Wednesday, not like, and at this point, it's not so much about the food, even though I actually think the food there is really good. It's because of the relationships that I'm building with the people who work there. And so at this point, the manager of Mo Bettis is somebody that I've talked to and become friends with since he was like just a regular employee. And then he left and went to another job, and then he came back, and then they made him manager. And so, man, I've been able to walk with him through these different stages of life. And so now when stuff happens in their life, I get the opportunity to pray for them in the middle of Mo Bettis. Who does that? Crazy people like me. And so I've stopped seeing Mo Bettis as just a place to eat. But it's a place for me to always point people to Christ. And listen, that's how I view going to Walmart. If you have been here for longer than 5 minutes, you know I'm an introvert. Without Jesus, let me put it that way. Without Jesus, I don't want to talk to anybody. Like there are some days where like I'm not submitted to the Spirit like I should be, and like I'll go almost 24 hours and not even say a word to Hannah or anybody else, and I'm okay with that. God's not okay with that. Anyway, that I say all of that to say, like I go to Walmart and there's not a time that I don't just speak to some random person. I have made friends with the people at Smith's, at Fred Meyer, one of the managers at Albertsons I'm friends with. Because I realize that every place that I go is not just a grocery store. It's not just a shop for them to work on my car. It is not just a restaurant for me to eat at, but it is an opportunity for me to always point somebody to Christ. Maddie said it earlier. I haven't said this statement in a long time, is being Jesus with skin on. Man, sometimes that you will be the only Jesus some people ever see. And that should shape how you interact with people. It should shape how you think of going to the grocery store. And y'all ever go to the grocery store? And you just literally get what you need and you get out of there, right? Yeah. Man, let's start to reframe the way that we look at our community. You know what's really cool? And you're probably going to laugh at me all at the same time. But you literally go to the same place every single day. And you're in the same classroom with the same 20-ish people. Depending on what school you go to, your whole class might be 20-ish people. And listen, you are not there by accident. You have been uniquely placed in the school that you go to, in the classes that you're in. And some of y'all sitting there going, well, Pastor Andrew, I picked my schedule at the beginning of the year. I'm there because I picked those classes. No, man. See, God already knew that you were going to be in those classes. And he has placed you not to just sit in the back and be quiet. He's placed you there not to sit at the front and be a distraction. That he has placed you in the places that you are in to point people to Jesus, to be Jesus with skin on. And so listen to what it says in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. It says, just as each one has received a gift. See, prior to this, they're talking about spiritual gifts. And just so you know, just to fill you in, if you have given your life to Christ, you, whether you know it or not, have at least one spiritual gift, and that's a whole other series for a whole other time. But this is what it's saying is that just as each one has received a gift, you have received a gift if you have submitted your life to Christ. He says, use it to serve other people. Use it to serve others as good stewards of the varied grace of God. Look at the next slide. Listen, if God gives you freedom, it's so that you can help somebody else find freedom. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, it says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So stand firm then and don't submit again to the yoke of slavery. The next slide, listen, if God gives you clarity, it's so that you can point people to the truth so that they can find clarity. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4, it says, he comforts us in all our affliction so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort that we have received from God. See, God gives you comfort so that you can then extend that comfort to somebody else who needs it. Do you know anybody in your class, anybody at your school who needs comfort? Bruh, we should all be raising our hands. That's wild. And we have been given comfort. And so we should be giving that same comfort. This next slide, it says this. If God gives you courage, man, it's so that you can stand when others are afraid. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13, it says, be alert, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. There are other translations that I actually like it. And right there where it says be courageous, you know what it says? Guys, look at me. Like guys, males, look at me. Right there, it literally says act like men. Act like men. Be strong. Some of y'all too busy playing video games to act like men. Be strong. Stand firm in the faith. And so let's make this real. Man, think of somebody at your school. Maybe they're struggling with family stuff. Man, maybe they don't really have a home life at all. You know, there was a kid in one of my first youth groups. He was 17, still a sophomore, lived by himself, had nobody, worked every single night, went to school every single day. And if you didn't know, you would never be able to tell. Man, maybe you've got people in your school who are like that, or nobody notices them. See, you can take the time to reach out to them. Like, you could invite them to sit with you. You could notice them. You could be Jesus with skin on to them. And it may be small. It may feel, actually, it will feel awkward. Let me just tell you that. It may even be scary. But listen, fasting and prayer turns into action. Or maybe it's something bigger. Maybe God is calling you to speak up when someone else is being treated unfairly. Man, maybe God is calling you to stand up for your faith when it would be easier to stay quiet. I've heard plenty of stories of even people sitting in this room who they were in science class and they were talking about like evolution and the different creation theories and things like that. And they actually, like, the class didn't address like the biblical creation story, and so they were like, hey, like, no, like, this is it. And they brought up the conversation in their science class. They could have just sat there and just been quiet, not said a word. Man, maybe God's calling you to choose kindness when somebody's being torn down. Everyone else is being cruel to them, making fun of the way that they look, the clothes that they're wearing. I get it, man. I grew up poor. I had shoes from Walmart. And not like Walmart shoes today, like that they're kind of cool. Like literally, like they were terrible. You knew that you had your shoes from Walmart. Maybe it's standing up for somebody like that. Maybe it's refusing to join in with your friends who are making fun of your teacher. Listen, God is calling you to something. Maybe it's not always loud, maybe it's not always on a stage, but it is always outward. And fasting helps shift our focus from, man, God, what do I want? To God, where are you sending me to go? And so if all of this is true that we've talked about tonight, if surrender comes before courage, if fasting prepares us for calling, and if God isn't just shaping us for ourselves, then listen, we don't need another explanation. Again, this is the last night of this series. What we do need is we need a moment of honesty. See, because at some point, this stops being a story about Esther or the people in Acts or any other story in the Bible, and it becomes about your story and what God's trying to do in your life right now. And so for the next couple of minutes, next minute or two, listen, I want you to sit with two questions. You don't need to answer them out loud. You don't need to overthink them. Just be honest. Here's the first question. What is an area in your life that you need God to move in or change or free you from? For some of you, this is internal. Man, for some of you, it's anxiety that's been controlling how you live your life. It determines whether you go outside or not. Man, maybe it's allowing God to move in the bitterness that you've been holding against somebody else. Like that stuff that you just can't let go of. One day you'll be like, yeah, I forgave him. Everything's cool. But then you see him and then everything changes. You just want to choke him out. Man, maybe it's shame from something that you wish no one knew about. Man, maybe you got a habit. Maybe you're the one in the bathroom at school vaping, or at church vaping. Maybe it's a pattern. Or it's a mindset that keeps pulling you back. Or maybe it's external. Maybe it's none of those things. Man, maybe there's just tension at home. Maybe your parents are just going through some stuff or whatever, and you feel stuck in the middle of adult problems that you never asked to be a part of. Man, maybe it's your environment. Maybe you are in a toxic friend group, man, that just keeps pulling you in the wrong direction. Maybe it's drama that you just won't let go of. It's like you don't want to be in it, but then also you want to be in it all at the same time. It's like this weird feeling. You're like, I got to know the tea. Just spill the tea. Maybe you're constantly comparing yourself to the people around you or the fake people online. Or you feel the pressure to be somebody that you're not just to fit in. Man, maybe for some of you it's spiritual. Maybe there is temptation in your life that just feels a lot louder lately. Doubt keeps showing up. You're trying to follow God, but man, you just feel like you're in a desert somewhere far away. And maybe for some of you, it's something that you can't control at all. Maybe it's the consequences of somebody else's actions or a situation that feels unfair. Maybe it's something that you didn't choose, but you're having to live with every day. Man, I don't know each and every one of your stories, but you know your story. And so what is one area in your life where you need God to move in? See, fasting has a way to bring those to the surface. And it's not to shame us, but it's God being invited into those spaces. And then the second question I just want you to sit with. What's one step of obedience God is asking you to take next? I'm not talking about 5 steps. I'm not saying plan your whole future out. Just the next step. Man, for some of you, it might be forgiving that person that you've been avoiding. For others, it might be reaching out to that person that we were talking about earlier, the one who feels invisible. Man, for some of you in this room, it might be letting go of something that you've been holding on to that makes you feel like you're in control. Here's the thing that I want you to notice. See, God often connects these two questions. Not all the time, but often they're connected. the freedom that you're asking for in the first question is often tied to obedience that you've been resisting. And fasting sits right in the middle of that. It helps quiet the noise that loosens our grip on comfort, on the things that we try to distract ourselves with. And so will you stand to your feet? Join hands across the aisle. We're going to pray. You hear me say it often. Don't just listen to me pray. But in your own words, quietly just, tell God, I can't do this on my own anymore. If that's where you're at. If that's truly where you're at, just, you don't need me to say it for you. You don't need fancy words. You just need honest words. So go, God, I can't do this on my own. Let's pray together. Lord, I just thank you for tonight. God, I thank you for this series as we've been walking through just 21 days of prayer and fasting. God, I just pray that as we have grown in self-control, God, that this wouldn't be just about self-control. But God, it would be about making us ready for what you have next for us. And so, God, I'm just asking, God, that you would just meet us as we surrender. God, I'm not asking that you would make us fearless. But God, teach us to trust you in the middle of the things that life brings. God, let us be prepared for what you have for us. Because God, you know the past, the present, and the future. And so, God, we put our faith in our trust in you tonight, knowing that, God, you have our lives in your hand. And so, God, tonight we say, I just can't do this on my own. I don't want to do this on my own. I have tried to run my life myself, and I have just only wrecked it all. And so, God, I need you. We need you. God, make us more aware of your presence in our lives. And God, help us to start seeing our community, our schools, our jobs, if we have them, the places that we go, not just as a place that we occupy or a place that we walk through, but God, as a place where there's an opportunity to always point somebody towards you. God, let us live our life on mission for you. And that, God, that you would get all the glory, that we would live to make you famous. We thank you for what you're doing. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.